extremely nasty and filthy sex lives of white mistresses with black male slaves in hidden rooms and quarters. During the nighttime in the slavery era, most slaves were in their wooden slave huts built in the plantations. They were quite far away from the lavish mansions of their white masters. But sometimes a black female slave, working as the personal maid for the white mistress, would knock at the hut door. This was not just any hut. There, the strongest and powerful black male slaves lived, and they were put there on the white mistress's wish. The black maid would ask one of the black male slaves to come with her to the hidden quarter of his master's mansion, where the white mistress is waiting for him. But what did the white mistress want from the black male slave at this hour of the night? In this video, let's go deeper into the super nasty and dirty sex lives of white mistresses with their black male slaves.
The Black History Archives.
After delivering the white mistress's order that one of the strong black male slaves' presence was required, the maid would return. She knew the slave would come and knew which hidden room to enter. That's because refusal was not an option. The punishment for defying such a summons was swift and brutal. A man could find himself whipped until his back was shredded, confined to a dark cellar for days, or worse, sold off to another plantation hundreds of miles away, separated forever from his family. These were not mere threats. They were the brutal realities of slavery, a system that stripped men, women, and children of their humanity and made them the property of their enslavers. For the enslaved men, this power imbalance extended beyond physical labor to the most intimate and personal aspects of their existence. Consent, as a concept, did not exist for them. The law, the social order, and the plantation hierarchy made clear that their bodies were not their own. The walk to the mistress's chambers was a journey of despair. Black male slaves knew that what awaited them inside was not just an insult to their dignity, but a direct assault on their very identity. They were reduced to objects, instruments of the mistress's desires. The white woman who summoned them was often seen by society as the model of virtue, a sophisticated Southern lady dressed in lace and pearls, a Bible clutched in her hands during Sunday services. But behind closed doors, these same women wielded their authority with unchecked dominance, indulging in desires they could never openly acknowledge. For the men, survival depended on compliance. They were aware of the precarious balance they had to maintain. Even a hint of resistance could provoke the mistress's wrath, leading to accusations of disrespect or insubordination. Such accusations were deadly. An enslaved man falsely accused of assaulting or disrespecting a white woman could be lynched, tortured, or executed without trial. This threat hung over their heads like a sword, ensuring their silence and submission. Testimonies collected by the Federal Writers Project in the 1930s provide chilling insights into these dynamics. One formerly enslaved man recalled, "She'd call me to her room at night. I couldn't say no. If I did, I knew what would happen to me. She'd have me whipped, or worse, sold." His words, simple yet heavy with emotion, show the impossible choice faced by enslaved men. To comply meant enduring the unendurable. To resist meant risking everything. Historical accounts reveal the broader societal complicity in these abuses. White mistresses operated under the protection of a patriarchal system that shielded their actions from scrutiny. While their husbands were often known for their sexual exploitation of enslaved women, the mistress's transgressions were rarely acknowledged. Mary Chestnut, a Southern diarist during the Civil War, wrote extensively about the moral decay she perceived in the relationships between enslaved women and their male relatives. Yet, she remained silent on the power white women exercised over enslaved men, reflecting a societal blindness to the full scope of abuse. Even Harriet Jacobs, in her seminal autobiography, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, hinted at these dynamics while focusing primarily on the exploitation of enslaved women. Jacobs described the plantation as a place where power was absolute and abuse was pervasive, touching every aspect of life. Her writings suggest a broader, unspoken acknowledgement of the ways in which white women, too, participated in and benefited from the system of slavery. Modern historians, including Dana Ramey Berry and Adrienne Davis, have further explored these hidden abuses, shedding light on the intersections of race, gender, and power within slavery. They argue that white mistresses often use their control over enslaved men to assert a twisted form of agency within a patriarchal system that otherwise limited their autonomy. The unspoken horrors of the plantation extended beyond the physical violence and grueling labor imposed on enslaved individuals. The power dynamics of slavery allowed mistresses to exploit their authority in deeply personal and dehumanizing ways, with devastating consequences. Public humiliation often followed the abuse, ensuring that the enslaved man would not only endure the violation in private, but also be stripped of dignity in the eyes of his community. One chilling account from historical narratives describes a mistress who repeatedly forced a male slave into sexual acts, only to later humiliate him in front of the plantation's enslaved workers. After one such incident, she ordered him to perform menial tasks in the yard while berating him loudly, calling him useless and weak. This public shaming not only reinforced her control, but ensured that the other enslaved individuals would see him as powerless and complicit, rather than a victim. This humiliation was deliberate and stripped the black male slave of any remaining sense of self-worth, while further isolating him from his peers. The plantation, already a theater of cruelty, became an even more isolating and oppressive environment for those subjected to such exploitation. Here's a reminder to please support us so we can make more videos for you by subscribing to our channel and giving the video a like. We want to build a strong community, and we need your support. Let's continue now. The architecture of plantations also played a sinister role in facilitating these abuses. Mistresses often summoned enslaved men to hidden quarters, especially at night. These secluded spaces, which could be attics, bedrooms, or even storage rooms, served as domains of unchallenged power. In several narratives documented by historians, enslaved men recounted being called to the attic for repairs or other vague chores. These spaces, distant from the eyes and ears of the plantation household, provided a cloak of secrecy for the mistress's actions. One formerly enslaved man recalled being locked in a storage room by his mistress after he attempted to leave during her advances. She withheld the key, standing at the door and threatening to call for the overseer if he did not comply. "I knew what would happen if I refused," he said in an interview years later. "It was either give her what she wanted or face the whip, maybe worse." The room, with its single flickering lantern and suffocating silence, became a prison where physical and psychological coercion entangled. These violations were fueled by a toxic racial fetishization. White women, indoctrinated by the racist ideologies of their time, often viewed black men through a lens of hypersexuality and exoticism. The stereotype of the beast was both a justification and a weapon. Black men were objectified for their perceived physicality and dehumanized as dangerous and uncontrollable. This duality allowed mistresses to exploit them in private while maintaining descriptions of victimhood or moral superiority in public. The fetishization of black men as exotic and forbidden objects of desire played a central role in their exploitation. Plantation mistresses often selected enslaved men for their physical attributes, emphasizing strength or attractiveness. These choices were not acts of admiration, but of dehumanization, reducing men to mere tools for gratification. One enslaved man recalled how his mistress frequently commented on his physique before summoning him. "She'd talk about how strong I looked," he said, "but it wasn't a compliment, it was a warning. She'd already decided what she wanted from me." Furthermore, some mistresses used promises of favoritism to trap enslaved men, offering better food, lighter workloads, or protection from the overseer in exchange for compliance. These favors, however, were traps. The men knew that the withdrawal of these privileges could result in harsher treatment, making refusal all the more dangerous. In some cases, mistresses pretended affection, creating a mask of mutuality that concealed the inherent violence of the relationship. The possessiveness of mistresses extended beyond the physical domain. Enslaved men who were targeted for exploitation were often isolated from their communities. This isolation served two purposes. It ensured the secrecy of the abuse and reinforced the mistress's control by cutting off the man's support system. In some instances, mistresses punished enslaved men for interacting with others, further deepening their isolation. The hidden dynamics of plantation life occasionally surfaced in legal and personal records, offering glimpses into the abuses that were otherwise shrouded in silence. Court records, divorce proceedings, and personal diaries of plantation mistresses provide rare and unsettling insights into the exploitation of enslaved men, revealing how these relationships were both hidden and tacitly normalized within the framework of slavery. In Southern courtrooms, divorce cases sometimes exposed the abusive relationships between mistresses and enslaved men. These cases, though rare, often arose when the mistress's actions became impossible to ignore or threatened the family's social standing. Accusations of mistresses engaging in forced or consensual relationships with enslaved men were scandalous, but they were treated primarily as an issue of decency rather than abuse. When such accusations were raised in divorce proceedings, the response was not to acknowledge the inherent violence of these relationships, but to protect the family's reputation. One notable case documented in Southern court records involved a wealthy plantation owner who pursued a divorce after discovering his wife's repeated intimacies with an enslaved man. The husband claimed that the relationship brought dishonor to his household, and as part of the resolution, the enslaved man was immediately sold to another plantation, far from the region. The sale served two purposes. It erased the evidence of the affair and reasserted the husband's authority over both his wife and the enslaved community. The enslaved man, who had no agency in the matter, was punished not for any wrongdoing, but simply for being the target of the mistress's desires. Plantation Diaries provide another layer of insight into these hidden dynamics. The private writings of some mistresses reveal references to problems or indiscretions with enslaved men, hinting at relationships that could not be openly acknowledged. While these diaries rarely offer explicit details, their language suggests the existence of exploitative dynamics that were both normalized and concealed. In one diary, a mistress wrote about her troubles with an enslaved man who worked in the house. She described him as defiant and difficult to manage, but the context of her writing hinted at something more personal. Later entries revealed her decision to have him sold, a move she justified as necessary to restore order in the household. Historians analyzing such entries have noted the veiled language often used by mistresses to describe these relationships, which they framed as challenges to their authority rather than as abuses of power. Another diary entry from a different plantation mistress spoke of a private matter involving an enslaved man who had overstepped his bounds. The mistress expressed relief when her husband arranged for the man to be transferred to a distant estate, writing that it was better for everyone involved. Isn't it true that this part of Black history is intentionally hidden in history books to avoid the white embarrassment? Do you think Black people should know about what white mistresses did with them, besides knowing the other horrors of slavery? In the comment section right below, let us know what you think about whether the thought of their white wives being sexually pleased by Black male slaves worked as a form of punishment for the white masters. Would you like us to make more videos? If yes, please support us by subscribing to the Black History Archives and clicking the bell icon. You can check out more videos on our channel too.